The United Nations has urged Yemen's National Commission to investigate war crime violations. The nearly 2-year-long conflict has affected more than 21 million people, many of whom are children. We have a look at the conflict's most vulnerable victims. Well, for more on the situation in Yemen, I'm joined by Stevenson. He's a senior program manager for Oxfam in the city of Bristol in England. Shane, thanks so much for joining us. We just saw some very disturbing images of some of the smallest victims of this war. You recently returned from Yemen yourself, so tell us what you saw.
The situation within Yemen has deteriorated quite dramatically since the end of the peace talks. At the beginning of August, there's been escalation in airstrikes and in ground fighting across the whole of the country. Commercial flights into Sana'a, the capital, have stopped. So that means that emergency medical supplies are no longer able to come into the country. The port at Hodeida is in a very bad situation with lots of the cranes destroyed by airstrikes. So people are not able to import the food, and then the fuel prices are so high they can't distribute it across the country. So the situation is becoming worse. The figures that you cited, UNICEF have just come up that 1.5 million children are now malnourished. There's over 3 million people have now fled their homes because of lack of stability and security. And the situation is generally going to deteriorate unless we can get the peace talks to resume again. We can get people around the table and give the people of Yemen some hope.
Just quickly, do you think Yemen has actually just fallen into the shadows behind the conflict in Syria, and that the Yemeni people are paying a price for the international community's attention being there rather than on them?
The war escalated, or the conflict escalated in March in 2015, and it's been bubbling over. But what's happening is that there's only internal displacement. People are fleeing from Taiz and Sada in the north, and they're staying with host communities. One of the differences with Syria is that refugees are leaving the Syrian border and going through Turkey into other countries, into Europe. So then it has more political weight and more publicity within the media. As the conflict's contained within Yemen, it's not getting the same level of media attention that we really, really strongly wish we had, so we could bring attention of the humanitarian situation as seen in your pictures and footage.
Right. Now, you're calling for some changes to be made. One of them is to get the United Kingdom's government to stop selling arms to Saudi Arabia. You say the UK is actually in violation of international law and that British weapons are being used to kill innocent civilians.
When I was in Sana'a, there was 6 or 7 times in the last 3 weeks where we had to seek shelter because there was airstrikes. And it was quite galling to know that some of these weapons are coming from the country that I represent. And yet I'm trying there with my organization, we're trying to provide support and assistance to the most vulnerable Yemeni people. There has been over 100 reports of violations of international humanitarian law by the United Nations, by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, from both sides of the conflict. And the Arms Trade Treaty makes it very clear, and the UK government have signed up and enshrined this into legislation, that if there's a risk of a breach of international humanitarian law, then arms sales should be suspended. And we're calling for the UK government to suspend the sale of arms to any of the warring conflict parties until there's been a proper investigation.
Okay.
The United Nations Humanitarian Forum has just in the last few hours voted to say that there will be an investigation, but it will not be independent, and it will be led by the Yemeni government.
Okay. Shane Stevenson, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, U.S. President Barack Obama